listening to the Premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
It is the H-Town Hoops podcast with Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane. Austin Mendez handling things for us behind the scenes. We appreciate y'all for being here with us. And the Rockets are about to start a bit of a homestand, you could say. 9 of the next 10 games, I believe, are going to be at Toyota Center. Is that right, Adam? I believe it's at least 8 of the next 9 or 9 of the next 10. It's quite a few.
It's something like that.
It's something like that after a 3-game road trip. And since the last time that we talked, Adam, the Rockets actually did go on a bit of a winning streak, but have dropped their last 2. And the theme of those last 2 losses, being to the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Milwaukee Bucks, Eastern Conference teams, was the drop in performance defensively for the Rockets. That was a theme for them, and obviously that's been a calling card for the team this season, a huge reason for their improvement, for their, I guess you could call it turnaround. I would call it that, certainly being in the mix for, one of those later lower seeds in the, in the play-in, or at least that being an aspiration of them and seeming realistic for them. But what do you make of these last couple of games for the Rockets? What has stood out to you about these games that they've lost?
So there's a couple things. And the first is, all right, you lose in Milwaukee, you give up, that's not a big deal if you're going to go get beat up a little bit by Milwaukee, especially on the defensive end. That's an elite offensive team, and they're going to be an elite offensive team. And you just don't really have anybody who can match up with Giannis, and you don't really and Lillard has just destroyed them now for years. So that one wasn't as big a deal. Last night, that's a tough one. Giving up, they finished, Cleveland scored 135, but they were 122 through 4 quarters. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that can't happen. Giving up a 33-point first quarter can't happen. Giving up a 42-point third quarter against, and Cleveland's a good team, but they're missing key guys. I mean, Cleveland without Darius Garland and without Evan Mobley, I mean, you can't have games like that. And 2 things stand out. They're not rebounding. They had a defensive rebounding rate of 59% in these 2 games. So they might play good initial defense to start a possession, but they're not finishing possessions. So that's an issue if you're not going to get any defensive rebounds, which they weren't. And then I guess there are 2 other things. They're fouling a lot. They gave up. Cleveland attempted 34 free throws on Monday. Milwaukee attempted 32 free throws on Sunday. That's way too many. And then both those teams were able to get up shots from inside the restricted area. The Rockets for the season are giving up 24 field goal attempts from the restricted area. It's 36 over the last 2 games. So those are kind of the things that you look at and you say, you know what? You might be playing against, at least with Milwaukee, you're playing against a good offensive team, but there were things that the Rockets just did very poorly. Fouling, not rebounding, and then giving up shots at the rim.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing to me, though, that you mentioned earlier about not having Evan Mobley, not having Darius Garland. Like, I understand it's a back-to-back, and, Cleveland's a good team, a pretty decent team, but they don't have 2 of their really important players. And Sam Merrill, do I have this right? Sam Merrill. Like, I don't even know who Sam Merrill is. And I saw a report or a write-up after the game that was mentioning how that's not a guy that's been in their regular rotation when they're whole, when they're healthy. And I'm like, you give up. He was in double figures. Sam Merrill had 13 points, went 5 of 10 from 3, 6 of 11 from the field. And I'm just like, look, that's not the end of the world, I guess. But you call yourself being a really good defensive team. You go out there and you face a team that doesn't have an all-star and a top, top 3 pick in Evan Mobley, that type of talent. They're missing those 2 type of guys. I just don't understand how you get beat by what's left of I don't understand they had Donovan Mitchell, but what's left of the Cleveland Cavaliers and Sam Merrill gives you 13 off the bench. Like, that's just, to me, that can't happen.
Hey, Sam Merrill can shoot it. I saw that guy hit a game winner in the Mountain West Conference Championship game in 2020. That guy can shoot.
Of course, Sam Merrill comes from the Mountain West. See, that's such a Mountain West name. What school does this guy come from?
Utah State.
Utah State. Yeah.
But and I get, the Sam Merrill thing didn't really necessarily bother me that much, just because he's a shooter, and sometimes shooters are going to get hot. Now, if you are getting to the point where he's attempting 10 3-pointers in 24 minutes, that's a bit of an issue. I think that's the biggest issue, is that you are even putting him in a position where he can have an open look. I mean, you've got to be able to. You got to be able to defend the perimeter a little bit better than that. But the Cavs. So I'm not going to make excuses for it. The lack of physicality was a problem. Fouling is a problem. Like, there's no reason for the Cavs to shoot 34 free throws in a game. Especially, maybe maybe you can excuse it by saying, well, Donovan Mitchell, he was able to draw a bunch of fouls. Maybe he took 15 free throws. No, that wasn't the case. Donovan Mitchell only took 5 free throws. So that means, like, you're allowing Jared Allen to take 7 free throws. You're allowing Max Strus to take 5. You're allowing Tristan Thompson. Now, they were hacking Tristan Thompson, so that number is a little bit inflated. But there's no reason that Max Strus should be taking 5 free throws and Jared Allen. That's just, you got to defend without fouling at some point. So all in all, you're going to have some bad defensive games. I think for this team to say, well, it was a back-to-back, I think that's just an awful excuse, because you don't have a bunch of 35-year-olds playing. You got essentially this is a young roster. This roster should not be impacted by playing back-to-backs at this point. So I don't like that as an excuse, but they have to be better. And for them to score, what was it, 122 if you score 122 points in regulation against a team missing an all-star guard, you should win that game, and you should win that game easily. And they didn't do that yesterday. So losing in Milwaukee, that was disappointing, but they were kind of in that game. And they just got, the Bucks are just a better team than them. But losing that game in Cleveland, I think that's a really disappointing effort. And to me, the rebounding, I mean, to allow 14 offensive rebounds in that game is just, I mean, Isaac Okoro had 4 offensive rebounds. Like, how that can't happen. Allowing essentially a guard to get 4 offensive rebounds, that to me is just kind of a lack of effort, and that's just playing soft, and that's what I attribute last night to.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Okoro, and I think he's also the one that had that strip on Jalen Green, if I'm not mistaken, when Jaylen Green's trying to drive on him, and it just looked like a poor showing. I could see, like, I don't want to give them the back-to-back excuse, but they did look like a team that was either tired, or if not tired, willing to allow the previous night to be an excuse for how they were playing. Like, they seemed sluggish and without some level of effort there, from what I could tell.
Well, they got a bunch of back-to-backs coming up, so they better figure that thing out. Otherwise, like, you're putting yourself in a really difficult spot where now you're not giving yourself an opportunity to try and pile up wins, because they've got a back-to-back. They've got a back-to-back this week. They've got a back-to-back next week. I mean, the schedule. The schedule becomes very, the way that they did the in-season tournament, you weren't playing a lot of games during that stretch because you had a bunch of open dates and things like that. And the league was clearing out the schedule back-to-back Sundays and only playing one play. They only played the one game on that Saturday, the championship game. So now everybody's got to play a bunch of games. And so you are, as a team, you got to get ready for what's coming with these back-to-backs, because they're going to have a lot of them. And if you can't win back-to-backs, and you're not giving yourself much of a chance to go on any sort of a run. They've been a good rebounding team, though, for a good portion of the year. Maybe it's just a 2-game blip. I don't know. But to me, that when you go through the numbers for the last 2 games, the rebounding really stood out to me, because having a defensive rebounding rate of 59% is just, to me, that's playing soft. And that's kind of the antithesis of what Ime Udoka has really stressed over the course of this season.
Yeah. Well, again, I know Jared Allen played, and they threw Tristan Thompson out there, but again, without one of their better bigs in the game or available for the game, and Evan Mobley, even if you're going to lose the game, if you're going to lose the game late and then close, there should be aspects of the games that you don't lose, and just like stylistically a way that you want to play their own like stated identity and what they want to be about. So we started off here, gave roughly 10 minutes on the bad, and that's of course the most recent thing that we've seen, because they lost these last couple of games, but they did win. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I just want to bring this up. To me, and we've talked about this a lot, but if they want to be a better rebounding team and a more consistent rebounding team, they've got to get more in that department from Shingun. And he has 10 defense. I talked about these 2 games where they're giving up 20. They gave up a total of 29 offensive rebounds in the last 2 games. Shingun has 10 defensive rebounds in these 2 games. He's averaging 7.1 defensive rebounds per 36 minutes. That's tied for 40th best in the entire league. He is averaging fewer defensive rebounds per 36 minutes than Asor Thompson, a guard. To me, this is an issue. And I don't know if you see it the same way, but for them to take a step and for them to get better and for them to consistently be a good defensive rebounding team, we've talked about him kind of walling up and being much better in the paint, but he's got to be able to rebound because he's your center, and oftentimes he might be the only big on the floor. And if he's not going to rebound, they're going to have a lot of trouble finishing possessions.
Yeah, I wondered, and I should probably give this a closer look, but I wondered how much it has to do with, like, he is giving some better effort defensively and how much his athletic limitations have to do with that. I don't think it's a good enough excuse. He should still be a better rebounder. But the thing about it, and for one thing, I didn't realize that the numbers were as bad as you just illustrated. So that's eye-opening for me a little bit. But also, I would point this out, and just to add to your point of how urgent it is, Auburn Shingun is their starting center, and they're effectively operating without really a backup center. I know Jock Landale has kind of gotten back into the mix. I know Jeff Green has, between Jeff Green and Jabari Smith, and like we said, Jock Landale is back in the mix. But I know they try to kind of figure out the 5 spot around, like the backup 5 spot, but they effectively don't have one. So it to me, it exacerbates the problem of not really having a backup center to speak of when your starting center, who is a focal point of your team, he's not just a 5th guy out there. He's a guy for you. When that guy's not rebounding and you don't have much behind him either, to me, that really, really hurts the team on top of it. Like, it increases the urgency that Shingun be the one to step up in that way.
Yeah, and it seems like that they are just going to play a small ball 5 when Shingun's off the floor, unless, there are certain matchups, but that seems to be the approach that they have taken really the entire season. I mean, Landale got some minutes early on, and then he got sick. I think he got hurt, and then he got sick, and he's not playing a whole lot. He hasn't been effective when he's been in there. And as we get closer to the trade deadline, I think that that's an area that they're going to look at, and it's an area that they probably should look at. And they've got some salaries that they can certainly stack to bring in another player. And I do think that that is a position of need. I do think that they need to add another big of some sort because there are going to be nights where they're going to need a second big. And they've also been remarkably healthy so far this season. Shingun hasn't missed a game. Shingun's not going to play all 82. So if he misses a game, what happens at that point? So I do think that's an area that they should and probably will look at some point.
So before these 2 games that we just talked about that they lost, the Rockets did, and this is since the last time we talked here on the podcast, the Rockets did win. I want to count them 5 straight since the last time we talked. We were going into that Oklahoma City game talking about how they needed a win. They had lost 3 straight leading up into that game, and they took care of business. So I did want to at least point that out and get from you maybe what stood out to you during the winning streak. What is it? Maybe there's something that they could go back to. What were they doing in the 5 games that they won that they're not doing in these 2 games that we haven't already hit on? I guess it's the defense and the rebounding are the main things, but is there anything they can pull from their 5 games of success and try to go back to once they since they're starting this homestand on Wednesday night?
Well, if you could play San Antonio, Memphis every single night, I think you'd be in pretty good shape. So
you look up. It's like I'm talking about defense. They hold San Antonio to 82. It's freaking San Antonio.
Yeah. So now there were a couple good wins in there. They beat Oklahoma City, like you said. They won a game in Denver, which was probably the best win that they've had in 3 years. So obviously you take positives out of that. But they were blessed with playing San Antonio and then playing 2 in a row against Memphis before Morant came back. So that certainly was beneficial, and they won those games. They should have won. Like, that's good though. That Memphis game, the second one, especially in Memphis, they had not been good on the road. And so that's the type of game that they should have won, and they won. And so you give them credit for that. It was also big as we move forward just through the rest of the season, because as they try and compete for one of these play-in spots, that essentially gave them a 10-game cushion with Memphis. And Memphis, as we're recording this right now, Memphis is getting beaten up pretty good in New Orleans with John Morant back. So the Grizzlies aren't going to pick up any ground on them tonight. And as the schedule dwindles down and as more and more games get played, that's less time for Memphis to try and come back on them. And again, the Rockets have to be able to finish in front of 5 teams in order to make the play-in. I think that you look at it, and they're going to finish in front of San Antonio. They'll finish in front of Portland. They'll finish in front of Utah. You finish in front of Memphis. That just leaves one more team that you've got to be able to stay in front of. And so I think that they are, even after these 2 losses, I think they are well positioned to make some sort of run into the spring.
All right, Adam. We got to get to this, man. Jaylen Green. I looked up, it was a big weekend for Houston because, the Texans beat the Titans wearing the Oilers uniforms, and it was a big Houston weekend. I look up and Scarface is performing on Tiny Desk, and I'm like, man, Houston is doing this thing. Then I look on the internet, man, and the internet's turned on Jalen Hurts for the Philadelphia Eagles, a Houston guy, and Jalen Green, the Houston Rockets number 2 overall pick from a couple of years ago. I see that he's trending, and it feels like every game I'm looking up and I'm seeing what the conversation is. And I'm not always trying to like pile on Jalen. It's a whole team. It's a team game, right? So it's not like we're just looking at one player, but it never fails. Like, I look up and Jaylen Green is a conversation. And I'm just seeing here now, looking at the game logs, and this tracks with the eye test, but he hasn't had a positive plus minus in weeks since the Dallas game, since the Mavericks game on November 28th. So a couple of weeks since he's had a positive plus minus game. He's not progressing the way I think at the rate, like, he's a better player now than he was, but not progressing at the rate and in the way I feel like people would like for him to do so. We've had a lot of conversations about this, but what are you seeing from Jaylen Green in terms of progression or lack thereof?
He's not shooting well. I think that's the big thing. I mean, you look, the last 8 games, he's shooting 33.6% from the field. That's not good enough. And you can shoot the ball poorly if you're getting to the free throw line. He's not getting to the free throw line either. Last night,
which he was last year. That was a thing that he'd improved upon, right?
His free throw shooting has gone down from last year. Let me pull up the numbers just so that I have them. But I think he attempted 7 free throws last night, which is good. I mean, that helps a 2 for 12 game look a little bit better when you can take 7 free throws and make all of them. But before last night's game, he had averaged 3.6 free throws in the 7 previous. Like, that's not good enough for a scorer. So the big thing, and people are always going to look at just the shooting numbers, because when you're an offensive guy, that's what you're supposed to be able to do well. And he's not doing that well right now. To me, the bigger issue is that he's not finishing games. And this is now, he didn't play the fourth quarter last night. During that winning streak that we talked about, he wasn't playing fourth quarters then. San Antonio, he did not play. I think it was San Antonio, he didn't play the fourth quarter. The Memphis game, he did not play the fourth quarter. Like, that's when you need him. Like, that guy is supposed to be on the floor in the fourth quarter, because they don't have anybody else who has his skill set, really. They don't have a guy who can go and get you easy offense. And so it's been Tari Eason kind of closing games in his spot. And Eason has been awesome, and we're going to talk about him in a minute. But Eason offensively isn't the talent that Jaylen Green is. And so they need somebody who can put the ball in the basket and create his own shot. That's not Eason. That's what Jaylen Green is supposed to be. And really, you look at this team, the Rockets don't have anybody else who can do that. That was supposed to kind of be Kevin Porter Jr.'s job coming off the bench, and obviously he's gone. So they don't really have anybody who can get to the rim and get you 25, who can get you like a 10-point quarter, just creating his own offense. So that's where they need him. And I think what was probably most disheartening than anything else was against Cleveland. He doesn't play the fourth quarter, but they bring him back for overtime because they're not looking to run Jeff Green into the ground. So they bring him back for overtime. He should be fresh. Everybody else on the floor should be exhausted. So that's when he should be able to take over the game, and he didn't do it. So that to me was probably as disheartening as it gets, where you have this guy who should be a high level scorer in this league. He's fresh. He's playing against a bunch of guys who aren't fresh, and he still can't put the ball in the basket.
Yeah, man. The thing that is wrong with Jaylen Green to me feels like the same thing that I've been saying about him since he got here. And that's that he's a streaky at best shooter. Like his jump shot, like some nights is falling. Like I think about some of the Lakers game of his rookie year. There's a Celtics game in there I'm thinking about. There are some games throughout his career where it's like, oh, so he can shoot. But for the most part, man, this inconsistency that we're seeing with his scoring is pretty consistent with what he's been. Like he's an inconsistent jump shooter. And I don't think that Jaylen Green can ever be the player or even just the scorer that he was projected to be if he doesn't develop a consistent jump shot. Because there are two things wrong with his game right now. And I'm just talking about offensively. Inconsistent jump shooter. But then you can pull this up, Adam, like his numbers of finishing at the rim. Like you remember when he first got in the league, he was like noticeably subpar at finishing at the rim, especially for somebody as athletic as he is. And he got stronger and he worked on his body, and it seemed like he got better at that for a stretch. But like he still doesn't feel like he's elite at that, he's not a great finisher or shooter. And so now he's just fast. He's just like he's lightning quick and has the athleticism to get by or jump over anybody. But man, if you can't finish at the rim, if you can't knock down jump shots consistently, I don't know how you're going to ever be able to be that reliable scorer, whether it's like, as a main option or whether it's like running the second unit or whatever it is. Like to me, he is like, you can count on him to be, one of the more special talents, like as you put it. But can you count on him to knock, like if you need a shot, can you count on him to knock down a jump shot? I never know how to feel when he shoots the ball. Never know how to feel, never know what to think. So I can only imagine, I imagine his confidence in his own shot is higher than mine in his shot, but I can only imagine what he must feel like and what his teammates must feel like when they watch his shot just be so inconsistent. Like his issue is not having a consistent jump shot, and being a subpar finisher for the type of athlete that he is.
So his finishing has actually gotten a little bit better, and he's still bad at it. But last year he was 50.6 last season. It's 51.2 this season. Again, that's still not good enough. You should be at least close to 60, or maybe 50. League average is about 60%. So he should be at least league average when you have his athletic gifts.
He should be better than league average, especially if he can't shoot. If he doesn't have a jumper, something's got to give here, Adam. Like he's either got to knock down shots, or he's got to be above league average, much less being below it and finishing at the rim.
Well, the numbers are down for him across the board. I mean, you look basically the only counting stat that is better or I guess there's two counting stats that are better for him this year than last year. He's rebounding a little bit better, and he's blocking more shots, which again, that stuff doesn't really, his turnovers is down a little bit. But again, a lot of this is just, he doesn't have the same sort of opportunity. The offense isn't quite running through him the same way that it has in the past. And a lot of that is having Fred VanVleet. And part of that is with Shingun getting more touches, and his minutes are way down too. I mean, this was a guy who was playing 34 minutes last year. He's playing 31 minutes this year. And part of that is because he can't get on the floor during the fourth quarter. So I'm not going to say that he's stalled, just because I do think that he is better in certain areas of his game, but he's not developing, I think, the way that people would have expected that he would have developed by this point. And part of that is the shooting just isn't there. And like you said, it's streaky and it can be erratic. But the fact that, last year he's taking 6 free throws a game, this year he's taking 5. Like the fact that he's not getting to he's not figuring out other ways to impact the game when he's not shooting well, because we saw this you see this from a lot of guys. The shot is, jump shooting is a variance stat. Sometimes the shot is going to go, sometimes the shot's not going to go, but you have to be able to figure out how to impact the game in other ways. And he's just not there yet. He does not know how to do that. And there are too many times where he'll be on the floor and you don't realize he's on the floor. And he is way too talented for that to be the case.
We've talked a lot about this on the podcast, about it being a crucial year for Jalen Green and Alperen Shingun. And part of that is because, after year 3 is when, you start getting that max contract, that max extension. Are we in agreement here? I'll speak for myself. I know I don't feel like right now he's a max player. Are we in agreement that Jalen Green is not a max player right now? It's not like they got to decide that today, as we do the podcast. But as we do the podcast today, I feel I feel pretty comfortable saying he's not a max player.
No, he's nowhere close to it. And again, this is how many games in? Are we 25 games in or 24, 25 games in at this point? So there's a long way to go. And they aren't, they could wait, they could make him play out year 4 and he's a restricted free agent. So basically all the cards are in their hand at this point. Like they don't have to do anything. But I think that they would like to be in a position to where they can make him that sort of offer, to where they can make him the massive extension offer, because you just like to be able to lock that part of your franchise in. But right now he doesn't deserve it. And right now he's not good enough for it.
Yeah. And you would also like to know, like if they wait, obviously they have the benefit of time right now and they can wait. But, and maybe this is just my impatience, but it feels like not only would you like to lock it up, but you would also like to know. You don't want to have to keep asking the question, is he a max player or is he not? Or is he going to prove it to me, and kind of just keep, just kind of keeping the door open. And typically by the time a guy has played 3 seasons, and I know he hasn't played 3 full seasons, we're just 20-something games into this one. But usually by this point, when a guy has played, especially as much as Jalen has played, he had that stretch there where he was injured. But for the most part, I mean, this guy's played a lot of basketball. You would like to feel like So that part of it is discouraging. With Shingun, I think there's some encouraging things about his game, but everything we talked about is also there. Like, how much do you want to invest in a big man who you can run your offense through, but does not really rebound at an elite level? Like that, and therefore, you would have to compensate for that. Like now, you need the things that he doesn't do still. So that's just a thing, man. Like I'm wanting for Jaylen Green. Like I'm like, hey, man, it's year 3. We talk about that year 3. This is supposed to be that year, and it's like you look up and it's like, man, kind of to your point, what you said. Man, we've made this point before, but we can make it again. Way too many times. A guy like that, a guy as talented as that, who can be the best player on the floor at any given moment, on any given night, should never go unnoticed. And speaking of never going unnoticed, let's talk about Tar Een.
Can I just add one more thing to that?
Absolutely.
Because the Rockets are in a position where they're expecting to win. And they're not playing for the lottery anymore. Like, they want to be in the playoffs this year. And I wonder if no improvement is shown between now and the trade deadline, which is in 6 weeks or so. Do they start to explore the possibility of trading Jaylen Green? And because right now, I think that if you, and I haven't gone through any of the names that might be available, it's still a little early for that. But if there's a team that's looking to sell some guys off, and the Rockets are in a position where they're trying to win games, do they use Jalen Green to try and get somebody who can help them right now? And first of all, it takes them out of the position of having to make that decision of whether or not he's a max level guy moving forward. And that might be a decision that they don't want to have to make right now. And it gives whoever trades for him enough time to get their gauge of him also, to where you don't have to sign him to anything after this season. You can wait and let him play out the rookie contract. But I do wonder if that is an avenue that they will at least explore as we get into the next month or so, because it does them no good to finish outside of the postseason this year. They could if they lose in the play-in, like that's great that they got to the play-in, but they don't get the lottery pick. The lottery pick is going to go to Oklahoma City unless they get lucky and get some lottery luck. So I wonder if that's a conversation that they're going to have between now and the deadline.
Yeah. So we did this topic on the radio last week, Ron Hughley and I, and he said he was on the side of, hey, I would at least explore or store. I would be, his exact phrasing was, I would be shopping them. And my phrasing was a little different, was I would be listening, but I wouldn't be shopping them. Like if there's somebody interested, what do you think on the shopping versus listening pendulum, so to speak? What do you think it would be sort of more appropriate? Like, do you think because of the way he's playing that the Rockets should be shopping him, or that maybe it would be more likely that teams would be interested to say, hey, maybe we could take off, their damaged goods, or however you want to put it?
No, I don't know if you should be shopping him, but if there's a couple players out there that you like, then I'm making calls and saying, hey, would you be interested in, we're interested in player X. Would you be interested in Jaylen Green and Y? You know what I mean? Like that's the sort of stuff that I would be identifying guys that you like and that you might think could help you today. And I would say, hey, is Jaylen Green a guy that you're interested in? So I wouldn't be like calling around to every single team, gauging interest, but I would be kind of in listen mode and then in, would you be interested in this guy also for this specific player?
Yeah, so I should have given this more thought. This is something that we can do on the next episode, and maybe not on the next episode, but at some point before the deadline, identifying guys, and we don't have to necessarily.
Well, I got two for you right now.
All right, go ahead. Shoot.
I want to pull up the salaries just to see if this is actually. Some of these might not be quite as doable as I think they might be. I'm gonna pull up the trade machine. DeMar DeRozan, free agent at the end of the season. If you are trying to win, if you're the Rockets and you're trying to win right now, DeMar DeRozan, who helps you more right now, DeMar DeRozan or Jalen Green?
Yeah, DeMar DeRozan, I think. Yeah, I think that's that's pretty clear. But you know what bothers me about that? I feel like you trade for DeMar DeRozan and all you are is the Bulls.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong
you
at
know
all.
What I mean? Like you're just the Bulls. Not as old, but kind of. A team that could just strive to be that 6 seed, baby. Like you hang a banner if you got the 6 seed for the ceiling of that team. So yes, the answer to the question is yeah, he helps you more. I think he's a better player right now. And hell, if Jalen Green turns into DeMar DeRozan, I'll take that at this point. Like if he ever even becomes DeMar DeRozan, but that doesn't really do a lot for you other than makes you a play-in team and maybe a 6 seed.
Can I offer you a trade? Well, hang on, that didn't work. So trying to do this one on the fly.
The Bulls would be ecstatic, by the way. The Bulls, they because they've got nothing going for themselves. That's just an aside. I know this is a Rockets podcast, but they would be excited. So,
but you can make that work. Landale, Oladipo, Jalen Green for DeMar DeRozan. That's one of those things that would work. Again, I don't think I would necessarily. I wouldn't do it, But I do think that is if you are the Rockets, and again, you're trying to win right now because they are trying to win right now. And if you don't think that Jalen Green is going to get you there, then I think it's a conversation worth having. And as we get to the middle of year 3 for him, I think it's a legitimate question to start asking: is this a real guy? Is this a guy moving forward that you can really count on? I don't know. I think that the last few weeks have been underwhelming, to say the least.
Yeah. Did they? What did they do with Zach LaVine? They haven't extended him.
No, well, he's signed long term, but that salary is too much. Trust me, I looked at that one too. The deal that I kind of had in mind was Patrick Williams and DeMar DeRozan for the 3 Rockets that I mentioned, but the salaries are too much right now. So I'd have to add in another guy. Like you'd have to add in Jayshawn Tate to make that work.
Oh no, Udoka's not going to want to give up Jayshawn Tate.
And again, it's tough if you're the Rockets in that respect, just because DeRozan's a free agent at the end of the season, and Patrick Williams is also a free agent at the end of the season. So, like, you almost have to splurge on both of them to make the trade worth it. So it's when your top 5 picks don't work out, or when they are perceived to have not worked out, it puts your organization in a very difficult spot because you've invested a lot in these guys and you're scared about giving up on them a little too early, but at the same time, you might value them a little more than they should be valued. So it's a tough conversation that you have to have.
How much stock do you put into the new system? Like, is that a good enough? I understand that it's an adjustment, playing for a different coach, playing with different teammates. He's got more veteran teammates. I understand it's an adjustment. I'm not trying to minimize that, but is it a good enough excuse for? I don't think there is a good enough excuse for the struggles. I mean, it's a meritocracy. You got to perform, but like, what do you make of how that factors into his struggles? The different teammates, the different coaching. I saw our guy Big Sarge, mention on Twitter that he thinks he misses KPJ. I was like, that is a very that is a very against the grain take from you, and that's why you are Big Sarge, my guy, and I love you for it. But just overall, like, do you cut him any slack for the adjustment that he's having to make? I mean, we're 20-something games into the adjustment at this point.
No, because it's getting worse. Like it's one thing to really struggle at the start of the season, but then you want to see progressive improvement, and he's not really improving. The line is kind of pointing down since the season started. So that's why I don't put a lot into that at this point.
Yeah, man.
And that was the excuse that I made at the start of the year. Like that's word for word. The excuse that I made was, hey, he's dealing with a new system. He's dealing with a bunch of new teammates. So yeah, there's going to be some growing pains, but the fact that it's seemingly getting worse, I can't make that excuse anymore.
Yeah, because better coaching is supposed to make you better. Better teammates are supposed to make you better. So why is it not better? You know, like that was like, okay, unless you're trying to tell me that he got a worse coach and worse teammates, which I don't think anybody has argued. I haven't, out of all the arguing that I see, I don't see anybody arguing that. Then I don't see how we could lean on that. You know, better should make better. I'm not great at math, but that just seems like simple addition. So yeah, man, it's got to get better with Jaylen Green. The trade talks are, man, I can't believe that this is where we're at, man. That we would be where we're talking about where you're like, can I interest you in some DeMar DeRozan? Hey, let me give you an inconsistent jump shooting young shooting guard for a non-3-point shooting, but really, really good elite mid-range to two-pointer shooting guard. Like, can I interest you in that? It's like, no, I don't want to trade for a guard who doesn't shoot threes in 2023 and 2024. No, with respect to DeMar DeRozan, who I respect a lot, but goodness gracious,
But
let's
hey,
just
they struggle to find offense at the end of these games. And DeMar DeRozan, if he's anything, he's a guy
yep,
that can get you points at the end of games. So
for sure.
again,
Oh yeah, you know what? That's a great point though, and I think we're both like a no on that on the DeMar DeRozan thing. But to your point, I have the conversation with Rockets fans all the time, like who's their closer, and we kind of got some insight into that in the Cleveland game. That was kind of a big deal. Shingun getting that, having that fadeaway jumper there with a chance to win the game, and they end up going to overtime and coughing it up. But like, who is this team's closer? Like, we've kind of, I think, agreed that it was Fred VanVleet, but like, with respect to Fred VanVleet, like if you're going to be a serious team, you got to have more. You got to at least have more options than that. And what a way to get the band back together. Who's your closer, baby? The old Raptors and Alperen Sengun. Fred VanVleet, DeMar DeRozan, and Alperen Sengun with a little Dylan Brooks mixed in. I like, to the point. At the end of a game, who gets the ball? I would feel, and Rockets fans, I'm sure, would feel way, 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 way more comfortable with the idea of DeMar DeRozan being on the basketball floor. So there is at least that.
yeah, again, it's not a trade that I would make, but it is something that as we move further along, you kind of have to. If they have a lot of information on Jalen Green at this point. Like they know him, they have seen him in practice. They see a whole lot more than what we see. But if you don't think that he's going to be a guy for you, then you should probably move on sooner rather than later, just so that you're not in the position of overpaying. Because especially like these contracts are like serious. Like you're talking about 9 figures, and like as soon as you a lot of these guys, as soon as you give him that contract, they are untradeable. Like you look at Miami and Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero's kind of untradeable at this point. Like they've tried to trade him for a lot of different guys, and they can't seem to get any takers. So like these guys on rookie deals, that's when they're at their most value. But once you have to pay them, if they aren't like that guy, then it's really difficult to get them off your books. And so that's why they're in a really tough spot with this, and that's why they really need Jaylen Green over whether it's the next 6 weeks or the final 60-something games of the season. He's got to show them something. Otherwise, you have to start asking those difficult questions that you don't necessarily want to have to ask.
Questions like when you brought up Tyler Hero's name, is Jalen Green as good as Tyler Hero?
No, he's not.
He's not. He's not. It was kind of rhetorical because we already knew the answer. It's like, no, that's not it. That's not it. All right, man. So when this coaching hire was made, when the Rockets hired Ime Udoka to be their head coach, from the beginning, you and I identified a couple of guys that would definitely be a couple of guys who are already on the team. This is obviously before free agency or before signing trades or whatever. We identified a couple of guys on the team that for sure struck us as Udoka guys, Udoka type of players. Jayshawn Tate stood out. We mentioned Jabari Smith. But Tari Eason, very much and at least in my view, and I'm not around Ime Udoka the way you are, but very much a Udoka type player to me. And it's manifesting itself through some of the things that we talked about with Jalen Green struggles, but also Tari Eason has earned his spot on the basketball floor. He's earned his spot, his increased role, I would say, in the rotation. How would you characterize the way that Tari Eason has earned his minutes this year?
He's been a star, and that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but he makes an impact, and he's always around the ball. He's always making things happen, whether it's deflections or steals or blocks or running down rebounds. He plays the game hard, and you always know he's out there. And I think that's been important for him. He's shooting the ball better. He's making quicker decisions. Like he's taken a step, and he's a guy. He doesn't start games, but it seems like he's closing every single game. And early in the year, when he was hurt and they had him on that minutes restriction, they missed him. And now you're seeing it now where there's no restrictions at all, and he's playing both games of back-to-backs. He's playing however many minutes a game. I mean, he just makes things happen, and he's a positive player on both ends of the floor. He can guard anyone. It seems like 1 through 5. So he's just an excellent player, and he's only going to get better. I think that they haven't necessarily gotten the returns that they want out of their top 5 picks. You know, the Jalen Green and Jabari Smith and Amen Thompson, like they haven't gotten necessarily the returns that they want out of those 3 guys. But when you look at what they've done in the middle of the first round, those guys have hit, and those guys have been just terrific picks so far.
Yeah, he's a foundational piece. He's a building block. Like, unless you're, I mean, it's gonna have to be something a lot better than obviously than a DeMar DeRozan. Unless you're gonna be like to me, he's a guy that you wouldn't trade. You know, unless you're getting, you know, some type of superstar back in you know, it'd have to be an overwhelming type of deal. Like, I think it's that big. For me, it's very interesting. You just juxtapose the later first round picks that they got, or I guess you say the mid first round picks, because the later ones are like not on the team anymore. But those mid picks versus the top picks that they drafted, and how things have shaken out with them. I just wish, and I'm sure a lot of Rockets fans probably feel this way if they have not thought of it in this particular manner, but I just wish you could either bottle up whatever it is that allows Tar Een to play the way that he plays and to be noticed on the floor in the way that he's noticed, and give it to Jalen Green, or give Jaylen Green's talent to Tar Een. You know, like if you could bottle them up into one player, or have them like just follow each other around and try to like rub off the best of each other onto the next one, you know, and look, Tar Een is not going to be the, you know, going to have the physical gifts that Jalen Green is. So that would probably be a useless exercise, but I would love for Jalen to have some of the things that Tari has. And it's not, you know, I hate to even say that or to pit guys against each other, but I mean, and like we said, we just talked about the number 2 overall pick from a couple of years ago, and Jaylen Green being somebody who there are times where you don't notice him on the floor, and then Tar Een being a guy who you always notice. It's like a Tasmanian devil out there, and even and that's actually a discredit or a slight to him. He was kind of more of a Tasmanian devil last year. This year, man, he actually plays with his hair on fire, and I think with a level of measured, and just to me, he's just an overall better player than he was a year ago, which is kind of the story of Tar Een. You see him one year, see him the next, he's better. You know, that's been the case with him going all the way back to college. You know, before he got to LSU, then when he got to LSU, and now since he's been in the NBA, it's like this is a dude who is just like dead set on getting better and better.
Yeah, he works. He's a worker. He's a worker off the court. He's a worker on the court. You just can't say enough good things. Like, you really cannot say enough good things about the guy. And he's gonna get better just because the game will slow down a little bit for him. But I think he's a guy who has kind of become indispensable at this point. And I did want, I wondered how the rotation would start to work out. And, somebody was telling me that they thought that Eason would be the one who would maybe lose minutes early on, and he would lose the minutes to Tate when the season started. And, Tate's been fine. Tate's played okay. But as you've seen, I mean, they can't take Eason off the floor. And I want to see just what his numbers are, just his plus minus when he's on the floor, just because it seems like he just makes an impact. And the fact that he is closing games, it seems like every night, I think that's important. That's a really important development for him over the course of the season. Let's see, when Eason is on the court, this season. They are at plus 5.7 per game. So over 100 minutes. Sorry, I'm trying to do this on the fly here. The Rockets with Eason on the floor are at plus 13.8 per 100 possessions. With Tari Eason off the floor, they are minus 1.5 per 100 possessions. So that tells you everything you know. They are a plus 13.5 when he is on the floor. Or excuse me, they're a plus 13.8 when he's on the floor. That is by far the best mark out of anybody on their team.
Yeah. Man, I watch every game, and I can see and comprehend the impact from watching it, but that actually is even more than I would have. That illustrates it even more than I would have guessed, or more than I would have said just from watching the game.
And it's all defense. They are a little worse offensively with Eason on the floor. Defensively, their defensive rating is for the season. Their defensive rating is 109.4. When Eason is on the floor, their defensive rating is 97.3. So that's what, a 12-point difference. It's absolutely absurd. Yeah. And he can lock guys down. He can force turnovers. Like it's special. Some of the things that he can do.
Yeah, maybe it's just as simple as, hey, if Jaylen can be the offensive player that Tari is the defensive player, then you might be cooking with grease. So, but that's not the bag on it. Credit to Tari Eason for being the worker bee that he is. I mean, the dude is just a relentless, tireless worker, and the Rockets are benefiting from it. All right, let's get out of here on this, man. We got these fines. It would have helped if I had marked down how much they got fined. I don't think anybody cares how much Ime Udoka and Dillon Brooks get fined. The reason why I even bring it up as a news item, because, well, it is a news item. They did get fined for treatment of the refs, criticizing and language toward the officials. I know you're a big the game within the game for you is always the officiating. I feel like Udoka's been ejected twice now, I believe. Dillon Brooks, if there was no Draymond Green, would lead the league in technical fouls, I'm pretty sure. I feel like they need to reel it in a little bit with the technical fouls and ejections. But I do like the attitude. And we've had this conversation before because, again, Udoka's been ejected before, and Dillon Brooks has obviously had his run-ins. I like the attitude. I like the sort of spirit of it. But also, what did you even think of the call? Like the principle of the call that they were arguing? Like, because we're not going to get fined, right? Like, wasn't Dillon Brooks arguing that he should have, like, he was called for a flop? Wasn't he arguing that he should have been, he was arguing that he was pushed out of bounds by Chris Middleton, right? And it didn't get called. I thought he was pushed. I thought they were on the right side of the call this time.
No, I did. I thought he got pushed. Listen, I have no problem with them complaining about the referees. Frankly, I kind of enjoy it when teams complain about the referees, and they're not shy about it. And those two specifically, and they had the thing after the Lakers game where, Dillon Brooks just went after the officials unprompted. Like, he didn't care. So that's kind of the edge that they want to play with. Hey, go ahead. It's going to cost you some money. It's going to cost you money with technical fouls. It's going to cost you money in league fines. And hey, if you want to pay it, go ahead. It's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. I don't know if it necessarily gets you anywhere. You're not going to all of a sudden get some favorable calls because you're calling out the officials and saying they're terrible or whatever, publicly. I don't think it helps, but hey, go ahead. Do what you want. It's America, free country.
Now, I think that if you develop a reputation, it can help and hurt. It could go either or both ways. It could present a quick trigger on the ref's part. When they see you, they know, hey, that's Dillon Brooks, that's Ime Udoka. They like to talk crap. They, we're gonna be ready to throw their asses out of the game if we got to. Or it could have an intimidation factor. Like, I feel like you got to set the tone. This is a new team. Set the tone a little bit. And, next time you get that officiating crew, they know, hey, man, maybe I'll pay more attention to this call, because if I get this call wrong, Ime Udoka is going to call me a motherfucker, or Dylan Brooks is going to call me a P word. Like I need to. Forget the technical foul. I don't want to be at work having people call me P words and MFers. So I don't know. I don't know. There needs to be a study done on this. The call ratio to post MF in a ref. Like, does it help at all? I don't know if anybody's ever done that study, but I'd be very intrigued to know.
Hey, I don't think the officials care. I don't think they care. Plus, you don't see these guys that often. There's so many refs. You might see one ref 4 times a year, and that might be a lot. So yeah, I don't think it matters. Hey, do what you want. It's your money. If you want to complain, go ahead and complain. I don't think it helps, but go ahead.
Fair enough. We've got some home games coming up, man, before the Christmas holiday. We've got Hawks on Wednesday. Then the Rockets host the Mavericks on Friday. I believe I had that right. And then they go to New Orleans, which is, just a hop, skip, and a jump, to face the Pelicans on Saturday, and then come back home to face the Pacers the day after Christmas. So we'll talk sometime after then, man. I imagine I'll see you Christmas Eve. Is that right? Sunday? Yeah, because we got Texans, we got Browns Texans. So a lot going on around these parts here, man. We'll circle back and see where we're at this time next week. Look, man, shout out to Austin Mendez for handling things for us behind the scenes. For Adam Spolane, Brandon Scott, we really appreciate y'all listening. Like, rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. Until next time, y'all be good.